So we're gonna go ahead and get started with step number 1, which is the design line. So in this step, I like to have my client tip down just a little bit. And the reason for that is that the shape of the head kind of dips in right here. And when she's straight up and down, sometimes some of the hair can get bunched up in there a little bit. So I find that if I tip her down just a little, just a tiny bit, that allows some of this hair in through here to release. And you never have those weird little pieces that are gonna pop out when you're done with your haircut. So it's just my little trick that I like to do to avoid little pieces that wanna stick out when the person looks down at the very end once it's dry. You're gonna notice that I do not section out my design line. And the reason for that in this particular haircut is because I'm gonna go in and layer all of this. So I'm not necessarily gonna spend time right now sectioning this out. And when it's hair that I'm gonna go back and cut anyway. So I just comb it all together. The most important thing is just making sure I comb very clean, very precise. I'm not allowing any of the hairs to cross over or anything like that as I'm combing. I'm gonna tip her just a little bit more here so you can see. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start in the middle. So I'm gonna grab that hair between my fingers, cutting palm to palm. I'm gonna make sure that the camera can see me. Palm to palm, like this. And I'm gonna go in and make my first cuts. I'm gonna check and make sure that's straight across. If it's not, I'm gonna go and clean that up a little bit. And then as I cut the design line, I'm gonna be cutting in this panel here, straight across. I'm not rounding around the head just yet. I'm just cutting back through here. And I'm gonna go back and forth to the right side and the left side. And the reason why I do that is because I don't really like to cut through all the way to one side and then all the way to the other. In case I'm off on my design line a little bit, then I have to go back and do a lot of fixing. If I just go back and forth, I can check it as I'm going and make sure my design line's nice and straight. Now, on this step, I would definitely be pumping my client up in her chair so that I'm not having to bend down because, of course, we want to be very ergonomic when we're working. So that's about all I'm going to do on that side. Now I'm going to go to the other side. Before I move on, I want to do a little bit of cross-checking, make sure my line is nice and clean. Nothing's uneven. Your mirror is going to really help you when you're working too. As you come around the side, you'll be able to see if your line is uneven, if one side's laying a little longer than the other. But in this case, I'm just going to do it by feel. And I'm pretty happy with the way that line is so far. So then from here, I am going to work around the shoulder. Now keep in mind, this is a doll head. She doesn't have a shoulder. She doesn't have a chair around her. On your client, you're gonna have a shoulder sticking out and you're gonna have a chair. So you're gonna be a lot further from her. So remember that when you're practicing on a doll head, that you're gonna feel a lot more awkward when you move on to a real person because you're further from your work. So now I'm tipping her over away from me. And if I'm talking to my guests, sometimes I'll just say, put your ear towards this shoulder here. And that way it opens up this area so that I don't end up with a hole or a shorter section because I'm trying to work over her shoulder. There's a couple different ways that you could do this section here. Some people like to turn the person to the back and cut along their back. And some people like to cut along the front. I like to cut along the side over the shoulder and bring it around to the front and then check it from the front. So I'll show you how I do that. So I have my guide from the back that I'm gonna bring out here. And I wanna be combing this hair straight down off of her head. Get that nice and tight in my fingers. I am cutting with a lot of tension. And I'm paying attention that her head's not falling forward or tipping back, and I'm gonna be cutting along her profile, using her profile as my guide of what's straight against her head. So I'm gonna come along this way, cutting back to my guide. I wanna make sure my combing is nice and clean. I'm not crossing over any of those hairs. Every bit of hair is coming down parallel from where it grows. My My comb is just gliding over her head, the tip of my comb. And then this is going to be my last cut here. Okay. Now, when we have a panel here and a panel there that we're cutting, we're going to meet here, and there's always going to be a little point. And so we want to make sure that we connect that point there, which I'm going to tip her diagonal forward to release this little spot here and to double check that I don't have a point where those two panels are meeting. It looks pretty clean. I never want to go in and take any length from that area. I'm just making sure it's blending nicely. Okay, now we're going to do the other side. I'm going to tip her over this way, releasing this shoulder, making sure my combing is nice and clean, nice and neat. Standing back a little bit from my work so that I don't get too comfortable working too close to her. Just because once I move into the salon, there's going to be a chair there. Okay, so now using her profile, I know that she's not tipping forward, she's not tipping back. This hair is coming straight down like this, and I'm going to do my first cut. Back again, just double checking that my line is nice and clean. And then I'm going to tip her diagonal forward here and making sure that those two panels are meeting up nicely and that there's no little point. And you can see right there, there is a tiny little point. And so I'm not going to take any length because the length's already been cut. I'm just blending point A to point B. That's it. Okay, so step one is done. Her design line is done. All I need to do now is check and make sure it's even on both sides. So to do that, I can come in front, double check that these are meeting nice and even in the middle there, and then I can move on to step number 2.